Okay, so we're going to find the vertex from standard form, and standard form is this guy right here. So this is what we have for standard form, where I've got this A, B, and C. If you've done the quadratic formula, you've used standard form when you plugged in your A, B, and C into that formula when you were solving for x-intercepts or zeros for a quadratic function. So that's what standard form is. This equation over here, well, this is the equation that I would use to find the axis of symmetry of a parabola, which is going to be where if I had some sort of a parabola and I wanted to know if I cut it in half so that they were the same on both sides, well, if I drew beautifully and they were the same on both sides, this equation right here, this dotted line, would be x equals negative b over 2a. Well, that happens to be that when I draw a line of symmetry, that's right in the middle of my parabola. It's also my vertex, and my vertex is hk. So we're saying that these guys, let me make this a different color here. I'm going to say this guy here and that guy here, well, they're the same equation. They're interchangeable to find that x value for your vertex or to find the equation for your axis of symmetry. Okay. So I'm going to build off this axis of symmetry in order to find my vertex of my example. So my example is over here, and I want to be able to find out what my x-coordinate is of my vertex and then use that information to find my y-coordinate. So I'm going to write this down that I'm looking for my x-coordinate and my y-coordinate, or my, we call this hk, right? My x and y of my vertex. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this axis of symmetry equation and say that x equals negative b over 2a. And when I'm looking at my equation, I'm going to highlight this over here. I'll do it in yellow. That I've got my b is the second term right here with the x with the power of 1 on it. And so in my case, it's 6. So I'm going to say that x equals negative 6, and then over 2. And my a, well, that's over here, right? That's the same as the a with the x squared in the term. So my a is going to be 3. All right. I'm going to do the math, and on top I still have a 6, and 2 times 3 is 6, and this gives me negative 1. So when I'm looking at my hk, or my xy of my vertex, I'm going to go ahead and erase this x right here. I'm going to replace it with this negative 1 that I figured out. So that's the x-coordinate of my vertex. Okay. Now that I have my x-coordinate of my vertex, so maybe I should do this over here. This is the x-coordinate of my vertex. I'm going to use that information to find my y-coordinate. So I should probably change colors. It might make things a little clearer. I'll use blue. And so I'm going to take my function right here that was given, and I'm going to write it down. Say I have f of x equals 3x squared plus 6x plus 7. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all of my x values, so this guy and this guy, with this value here for x that I just figured out. So when I do this, I'm really evaluating. So I'm going to write the notation and say I'm really going to evaluate at negative 1. So the notation one would use is I'm plugging in negative 1. So I put it as f of negative 1. Sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't. But I'm going to just do it just because it's a polite way to write this stuff down. I'm going to put parentheses in for all of the x's that I need to replace with negative 1. And I'm going to write my negative 1 in for those x values because I'm evaluating at negative 1. And I have to remember that I'm using the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which says that I have to do my exponents before I can multiply. So that means that I'm going to have to do this piece first before I multiply by this 3. So when I do that, I'm going to say that I have, this is -1 squared is a +1. So this is really times +1. So 3 times +1, and then plus 6 times -1 plus 7. Okay, so I did my exponents. The next thing I'm going to do is this multiplication step, and that's going to be 3 times 1 is 3, and +6 times 1, well, I'm going to change that. That's going to be a -6, and then a 7. And then I'm going to do my 3 minus 6, right, this part right here, my 3 minus 6, and that's going to be -3 plus 7, and -3 plus 7 is 4. Okay, so this is going to give me my y-coordinate. So I'm going to erase this part right here and put in this little, this is how I find my y-coordinate. Okay, and I'm going to rewrite that you have to do your order of operations, exponents, and then multiply. So we have that there. All right. Now I'm going to erase my y up here and say that I found what that value is, and it's 4. So I know that the vertex is -1, 4.